Yeah, so hi, it's Adam from Zero Friction Cycling. So today's episode, I'm going to be covering off the frequently asked questions for immersive waxing. Now this one is going to be a bit epic in that we get, I guess what we call frequently asked questions is quite a list. So initially I did have a shorter document, which was my frequently asked questions because they were sort of the main ones. But yeah, now with Zero Friction Cycling, pretty synonymous with immersive waxing around the world. I get a lot of questions around the world every night, and they I guess go into a whole bunch of different sort of detail areas, and so the FAQ document now it's really quite something, and so I'll apologise in that I'm not going to be talking to the camera directly too much like I normally would in a video. I'm going to be doing a lot of reading, pretty much verbatim from my new prep document. Simply because if I try to basically ad-lib the answers talking live, it's different to sort of responding in an email. I'm going to miss something, and then what I miss will just still keep coming through as a frequently asked question. So I'm going to do my best to just really, I guess, knock this the frequently asked questions of immersive waxing just as thoroughly as is possible at the moment. And I'm just going to cover every bit of detail. So if you've got questions about immersive waxing, and immersive waxing just does lend itself to, I guess, a lot of questions. So on the surface, honestly, like immersive waxing, a lot of people think it's complex and takes time. It's super, super easy. So literally, immersive waxing is basically you pop the chain off your bike, you thread it onto a swisher tool, you pop it onto your slow cooker pot and turn the pot on low. You come back whenever later, you swish it around, you hang it up to set, you come back, whenever or before your next ride. You break the wax bond on the links, which we went through all this in, I think it was episode 4. We demonstrated how to do a waxing, reinstall the chain and ride. 99.9% of immersive waxing, it is just that. What I'm going to be covering now is pretty much the next sort of 0.1%, and it's really just once people start to, I guess, go into immersive waxing. For a lot of people, they're kind of stepping into something that's just very different to what they're used to. They're used to dripping a lube on and wiping the chain, and away they go. So although it is actually really super simple, and I've got the guides that step through it, people just come up obviously thinking about a lot of questions about, like, I've got a road bike and a mountain bike. Is it different from my off-road bike? Is it suitable for that? Or I ride a lot in the wet, so is it going to be suitable for that? And what do I do about master links? And so fairly quickly we just get into a whole bunch of questions. So so we're going to go through all of the questions that I guess over the last sort of years that just really are coming through every night from all around the world. So yeah, forgive me as I read a lot so that I don't miss the detail. So, and no doubt there'll be a version 2 at some stage when more questions come through that aren't covered in this, but we'll kick off. Apologies in advance. I have no idea how long this one's going to go for. It's going to be a belter. This will be an epic FAQ.
Okay. Probably a big question that we get asked is, can I use a rice cooker, or does it have to be a slow cooker?
Yes, excellent. So it must be a slow cooker. Rice cookers are tempting because they're cheap and they're great size for a bag of wax, but paraffin does like to be heated slowly as well as not get too hot. Otherwise it breaks down the long chain molecules of the paraffin and it kills its lubricity. So also with rice cookers, after rapidly heating to 100 degrees, pretty much like a kettle, which is not good for the wax, it then goes to a warm setting, which it cools down to 60 degrees, which is basically near the set temp of the wax. And so when you come back and pull your chain out, you pull out a whole mess of wax with it. So they're just, rice cookers are not great. A slow cooker. So this one here, if you happen to be living in Australia, you can pick these up from Woolworths. They cost all of $16. You turn the slow cooker onto low, lid off. You can never ever go wrong. Perfect wax every time. So rice cooker will kill your wax over subsequent uses because it heats the wax too fast. So it must be a slow cooker.
And in saying that, I've had that exact same slow cooker since I started using wax, and it's still going fine.
Yeah. So actually, the next question we got on here, which I sort of covered, what slow cooker I recommend. In general in Australia, this one is a beauty, $16 from Woolworths, and it's a perfect size for a bag of wax and to put a chain in. If you're going to be doing multiple chains, so sometimes if you're going to be like a sort of fairly high mileage rider, you've got multiple chains or you've got multiple bikes and you want to rewax multiple at once, you might want to get a bigger slow cooker. So maybe something around a 3.5 litre. So again, usually say Kmart, just lots of places they sell these for sort of $25. They're really very, very cheap. In America, a slow cooker is basically the same as a crock pot. So they're the ones to go for.
Can I use an instant pot, and what is an instant pot?
Cool. So an instant pot is, in Australia, we would call that a multi-function cooker. So multi-function cookers, which is this one, they will have options like rice, steam, broil, dessert, soup, slow cook, and more. So instant pots and multi-cookers are perfectly fine as long as you choose the slow cook function. Obviously, you don't want to put it on, broil or something. So they're great, and they heat up a lot faster than a slow cooker, but not so fast that they damage the wax. So they're kind of a nice in-between. And they do give you the ability to set the temperature. So you can just set it to 90 degrees and it will get to 90 degrees and stay at 90 degrees. With a slow cooker, how long it takes to get up to temp will depend a lot on the ambient temperature, your wax fill level, things like that, because it's just putting a static amount of power in, whereas that will just, you set it to 90 and stays at 90. So they're great, but they do cost a lot more, especially if you're buying a decent quality one. So really, for most people, you don't need to spend the money on an instant pot. You shouldn't really need to be, I guess, waxing in a hurry, so to speak. You just pop it on there, turn it on low, go away, do fun stuff, come back later whenever to swish it, and you're all good. And with it on low, you can't ever damage it. You can forget about it and go to bed and wake up the next day or come back to it the next week and it's fine. So you don't need an Instant Pot. You don't need to have it exactly 90 degrees, or even, you've got a really wide range on what's fine. But for those that like to have it, perfect and a little bit quicker melting, then yeah, you may have seen or heard Instant Pots being referred to, and that's what one is. And yeah, that's my personal one. This has done thousands and thousands of waxings. I've got one because I like to go pro. So yep.
Is it okay to do it in a pot on my stove with a thermometer?
Okay, so aside from the Silka's sous vide bag, which I'll come back to later, which you would sort of use on a pot with some water, the answer in general is no. The trouble is, with melting wax on a stove, is you've got very, very poor temperature control, so it's really easy to overheat it or heat it too quickly. So things go wrong when people use a stovetop, a barbecue, a microwave, your oven, a camping stove, a pressure cooker. There's all sorts of strange things that sometimes people, well, what I think strange, that they go to try to heat up their wax, and it can overheat and kill it. Or if you get it really hot, you can actually sort of flash ignite the paraffin. So if you use a slow cooker, you just cannot go wrong. It's basically slow cooker on low, impossible. Or impossible to stuff it up. So it's no more dangerous doing wax in a slow cooker than it is boiling your kettle. In fact, it's sort of less so because the kettle water is going to be hotter. So no to the stove unless you're using a Silka with their sous vide bag,
which I'll lead on to. And what about the Silka bag?
Yeah, so the Silka hot melt wax. So that has come out in a pretty fancy bag, which is a sous vide bag. So you can basically put this in a pot of water on your stove and melt the wax that way. And so that was brought out by Silka really to, I guess, they sort of, I think, perceived that there was a bit of a barrier maybe to immersive waxing with having to get a crock pot or a slow cooker, and that you could just do it, with your existing, saucepan on the stove and you ripper. So yeah, it's like, obviously that's fine. That's what it's sort of designed to do. If you boil up your water in your pot, it's only going to get to 100 degrees. But Personally, my recommendation is still to use a slow cooker as opposed to using the Servita bag on your stove. Reason again is that if you do forget about it, so let's say you go to do a waxing and you forget and go to bed, the water's going to boil dry, your bag is going to melt, and you'll come out to a sort of a fairly exciting situation in the morning. So again, if you pour your bag of wax into the slow cooker on low, you can't go wrong. The Servita bag can be really handy, I guess, for some, like if you're traveling, for instance, and it can be just, I guess, a bit easier to just grab your Servita bag of wax and take that with you on your trip to wherever you're going. So it can be a bit easier, I guess, on that side of things. Also, apartment living, sometimes people just really don't want to add another appliance. They want to use what they've already got. So again, they sort of brought that out to, I think, really cover that segment of the market. One other thing to be aware of, I guess, why I recommend a slow cooker versus using the Servita bag, if that's practical for you, is that you can get a really good swishing with your sort of swisher tool and a slow cooker. It is actually a bit harder to do a really good swishing in the Servita bag, and if you don't give it a really good swishing, what happens is the friction modifiers, like your tungsten disulfide, when the wax melts, they will settle more to the bottom of the melted wax. So you can get a less even distribution of your really sort of fast friction modifiers through the wax in the Servita bag. You can do a really good swishing in there. It just takes a bit more sort of focus and effort to do it. Slow cooker, it's just super easy to get that great swishing done. So so that's pretty much the Servita bag. Few sort of pros and cons as to when it might be suitable for you versus using a slow cooker. But overall, if you can, I still recommend slow cooker versus using your bag in the pot.
Okay, how accurate do I need to be with my wax temperature?
Okay, not very. So with a slow cooker on low, depending on the fill level and depending on the ambient temperature, your wax is going to get somewhere between basically 70 to 100 degrees. Anywhere in that range, you will get a perfectly good waxing. So I guess the recommended temp on, say, the Malt Speed Wax website is 93 degrees Celsius. You don't have to get it to 93 degrees Celsius. Anywhere between basically 70 and 100, it is perfectly fine. Above 100, it's starting to get above the wax's sort of happy temp. The wax may start to fume if it's sort of getting really to about the 110 degree mark. So try to keep it under 100. But again, slow cooker on low, lid off. You can't overheat it. You can't go wrong. So you don't need a thermometer. Just come back whenever it's melted, swish it, and you're golden.
Do I need to pre-melt the wax?
Okay, no. So it's actually better to pop the chain onto the wax and then turn the pot onto low, remove the lid, go away and do some fun stuff, and then you just come back whenever it's melted, swish it around and hang it to set. When you put it onto the wax and let the chain heat up as the wax heats up, that's really what you want. You want the chain to get hot. You want the old coating to melt off into the wax pot, and then when you swish it, it's getting recoated. If you put the chain in, like if you have pre-melted the wax and you put the chain in cold, and that could be like you're doing, say, 2 chains, so you've only got the fill level or pot size to do 1 at a time. You're putting chain 2 in after you've done chain 1. Leave that chain in there for sort of at least 5 to 10 minutes to let that chain get right up to the same temp as the wax in the pot and let the old coating melt off and then give it a good swishing. So yeah, that's that one.
Should I put the full bag of wax in or just half a bag?
Okay, for me personally, that's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. So if you put half a bag in, so the theory behind it is that at a certain point, obviously you're going to then use the next half of the bag, so you're changing over to fresh wax. But with half a bag in, you're only going to get half the number of waxings anyway before I guess it's sort of got enough contamination in there that you should think about changing to the next fresh bag or fresh half bag. So no one's really been able to track a tangible difference on half a bag and changing it twice as often versus full bag and changing it half as often. So for me, much of a muchness. You can do whichever you like.
How long will a bag of molten speed wax or silica hot melt last?
So a long time. So generally for road riding, so I recommend, so now my recommendations are a little bit different to the manufacturers. So manufacturers, so molten speed wax, silica, they'll put out some pretty high kilometre ranges that you can get on a treatment of wax, and those ranges are correct. But I've tracked over a lot of years and with a lot of riders that there are quite tangible benefits to rewaxing early, so keeping that sort of rewax kilometres lower. So I recommend to rewax at about sort of 300 kilometres versus the manufacturers normally state around 600. If you rewax earlier, you are going to bring less contamination in because it's got less time to get into your chain. So for road, you're going to get about 30 rewaxes, say at about 300 kilometres per treatment. So really somewhere around about that sort of 8,000 to 10,000 kilometre range for road per bag of wax. So it's a very long time. For a lot of people, a bag of wax is pretty much going to take care of you for a year. For off-road riding, so off-road it's going to be, I guess, yeah, it's more dependent on your conditions. No sort of two areas off-roading really is the same. But in general, you're going to be looking at, say, around about 8 hours of sort of treatment lifespan for, I guess, what I'll call just general, normal, dry off-road conditions. So if you're doing 30 rewaxes at about, 8 hours, it's sort of well over, 200 hours of waxing. So, or 200 hours of riding, I should say. So call it sort of somewhere between 200 and 250 hours or sort of 4 to 5 suspension services. So a long time. Bag of wax lasts a long time.
I've read about a 2-pot system. Do you strongly recommend this, and how much difference does it really make?
Yeah, cool. So yeah, this one comes up a bit. So firstly, what is a 2-pot system? A 2-pot system is basically where I guess you're trying to extend the lifespan of your wax, so how many waxings you can get out of your bag of wax. So it's basically you've got pot 1 and pot 2. You put your chain in pot 1, and when that's melted, you swish it around, you let that wax drip off out of your chain, a decent amount. Then you put it into pot 2 and you swish it around in pot 2. And then, so after you've done your 30 rewaxes in total, pot 1 wax is disposed, pot 2 wax is now pot 1, and a fresh bag goes into pot 2. So that basically gives you, say, now 60 rewaxes out of your bag of wax as opposed to 30. So there is, though the question is, it's like, okay, but if I'm swishing it around a lot in pot 1, that's going to be more contaminated. Will I just be sort of over time obviously bringing that contamination to pot 2? The answer to that is yes, to a point you are. So at the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to do the 2-pot system, I guess, sort of how to do that like a boss. So there is a bit of a really key hint or tip to do a 2-pot system where you avoid doing that. But I guess the key tip, though, I'm going to recommend over the 2-pot system would be to have 2 chains on rotation. So we'll move into that one next. So I guess the answer to that, because I've rambled a bit there, is that 2-pot system, yes, it is better. You can get more lifespan out of your wax versus a 1-pot system. But I'm going to explain now why a 2-chain system is going to be even better.
So what is the Rewax Early 2-chain on rotation system?
Yep, so cool. So again, this comes from, I guess, years and literally just a lot of field testing as well as control testing. So if you rewax early, basically the chain metal just never really has a chance to come into play. You're just always keeping the chain freshly coated with a solid, super slippery coating of wax. And the lifespans you can achieve by rewaxing early versus always sort of pushing your treatment lifespans to the sort of the manufacturer recommended mark, it's quite enormous. So from a lot of tracking, basically for those that are rewaxing their chain by around about the 300 kilometre mark, which is what I recommend, the average lifespan for a quality chain like a YBN or a Campy is, to a genuine 0.5% recommended wear mark, is around 15,000 kilometres. And that's taking into account, even some really powerful riders. We've got, domestic pro teams that are, on this with some powerhouse riders, and about 15,000 Ks is the average. For for those that are frequently, I guess, really pushing to the limits of the treatment lifespan a lot, that drops down to about sort of 8 to 10,000. So that's still really good versus what they were used to on, on their drip lubes, which was typically 3 to 5,000, but obviously 15,000 Ks is better. Now, those that are, I guess, rewaxing erring on the early side, so if you sort of can keep it about that sort of 200, 250K mark, the lifespans can really actually zoom, to pretty astounding levels. We're talking like 20, 25,000 Ks out of a chain, which is pretty nuts. And honestly, most people don't believe it until they actually do it themselves and experience it. So, and I guess the other advantage of a 2-chain on rotation system is that you're basically guaranteeing yourself that you're going to get 2 chains through your cassette. So even on wax, which is sort of your best system overall, if you run a chain a bit long, especially with cassettes that can be a bit sort of delicate and soft like a Dura-Ace, you can find that after that 1 chain, you're going to need to buy a new cassette with your next new chain. So running 2 chains in rotation, you're guaranteeing basically that you're going to get your 2 chains through that cassette. And so we'll have a lot of, say, avid racers and riders and that with, say, on a 2-chain system. So they might be doing 400, 500 Ks a week of training. So they'll use 1 chain, say, for Monday to Friday, 1 chain for the weekend, rewax both at once on rest day. That's super time efficient. They don't have any drivetrain cleaning to do. And, they're usually changing their bike, after sort of 1 to 2 years. So their bike's done about 30,000 Ks when they sell it. And they haven't had to change any of their drivetrain components. They're still on their 2 training chains, which are going great. They're still on their original cassette. Chain rings are near mint. It's just really happy days. Versus in that same sort of time span, on the previous drip lube days, if they'd kept their bike for 30,000 K, they probably would have gone through about 6 chains and anywhere from sort of 3 to 6 cassettes. So that 2-chain system on rotation, it's just a really, really smart way to roll, especially if you've got a more expensive group set like Axis Road or Dura-Ace, especially now we've got new Dura-Ace 12-speed coming out, Campy Record, all that sort of stuff, just guaranteeing that length of time, and the chains that are lasting so long and getting 2 chains through your drivetrain, it's just such a massive cost saving and a very long time you don't have to worry about your drivetrain parts wearing out. And so depending on your mileage, you might be using, say, 1 chain for 1 week and then, 1 chain for the next week. Or avid rider, 1 for Monday to Friday, 1 for the weekend. If you're really avid and riding a lot in the wet, maybe you'll have 3 chains. Like at the end of the day, sooner or later, everyone's going to need to buy another chain. You're just pre-buying your next chain or your next 2 chains to just have them on rotation. So it doesn't cost you any more and it just saves you so much, money in your drivetrain wear. And rewaxing multiple chains at once is obviously more time convenient. So, so that's why I recommend the 2-chain on rotation system over the 2-pot system if you're sort of picking between them.
Okay. Isn't rewaxing that often a hassle?
Yeah. So no. So it may seem like it. So and that's where rewaxing early to get you those enormous drivetrain longevity figures, which honestly usually have to be experienced to be believed. That's where having your multiple chains makes it super easy. It takes you basically really no more time to wax 2 or 3 chains as it does to wax 1. So erring on that rewaxing early, that's going to drive you hopefully more towards considering going to a 2-chain option, or if really high mileage and harsh conditions, maybe even a 3-chain option, in which case honestly it is a doddle, because remember, you've got no drivetrain cleaning to do on the back end. It's just popping the chain off and you can just rewax them all at once. And it's just, it's a massive time saver versus trying to maintain, a black gritty mess with wet lubes. So,
Okay.
we'll cover that one.
Should I clean my chain before I rewax it?
Okay, no. So I don't know where this one came from. It comes up actually a fair bit, where I'll actually find out when I go to a race or just with cycling groups that somebody switched to waxing, and before every rewax, they're putting their chain through methylated spirits cleaning or terps and metho cleaning, and I don't know why or where that came from. So no, once you have done the initial prep of your chain, which is covered in the sort of episode before this one. Once you've done that, it is just pop the chain off your bike and re-wax for most riders most times. So there are some times where you will want to do some small, I guess really easy level of cleaning. So the first case of that is if you ride off-road. So now if you're riding in gravel and off-road mountain bike, some dust is going to stick to the surface of your chain, same as some dust sticks to the surface of your frame and you didn't lubricate your frame. So if you can just re-wax it, and honestly you're still going to get brilliant longevity and brilliant results as opposed to running a wet lube where it all just sticks and becomes a grinding paste. But if you can, it's great to obviously minimize how much abrasive contamination you bring into your wax pot to keep the wax in your pot super slippery and contamination free for as long as possible. So super easy, off-road dusty rides, just spray some metho or denatured alcohol or isopropyl alcohol, anything like that, onto a microfiber cloth. Wipe your chain, that's going to lift off the surface dust from the chain, and it's going to stop that then being imported into your wax pot. Dry road riding, you do not need to do anything at all, basically ever, just pop the chain off and re-wax. If you've done a proper wet ride, then water is basically the transport medium to bring a whole lot of crap off the road. The water brings it right through the chain, and that abrasive contamination gets pressed into the set coating of wax. And so if you don't do anything and just re-wax it, it's going to import, I guess, a fair bit more contamination than if you do a quick little boiling water flush rinse. So the recommendation for if you have ridden in a proper wet ride, be it off-road or on-road, boil up the kettle, swish the chain in an open container, same swisher tool as you use for waxing, just to basically melt off that old coating of wax, and it'll flush out most of the contamination with it. Dry the chain, put it on top of your wax pot and turn the pot on. So it's basically dry road, no cleaning, don't do that, or no need for any intervention. Dry off-road, just give it a wipe with some methylated spirits on a cloth and then re-wax, and that's it. Wet rides, boiling water flush rinse, and done. So.
Okay, do I need to hot water clean the chain after any wet ride, even just a light spray?
Yeah, cool. So that is a bit of an it depends. So if you've got a freshly waxed chain and it's just been a bit of a light spray, honestly, no, you're not going to need to worry about it. If the chain's sort of done a few hundred Ks and it's probably due for a bit of for a re-wax soon anyway. The chain's rollers are made of a high carbon steel for hardness, and the wax is abraded off the outside of the rollers first, leaving them unprotected. So it's not like a wet lube that keeps them sort of coated so they're exposed to the air, so they can oxidize. So it's one of those things that I guess if in doubt, if your chain's been out in the wet, if in doubt, re-wax it. But if it's, freshly waxed chain, light spray, you're going to be fine. But generally speaking, I do recommend any wet ride, err on the side of caution and just give it a re-wax. It's very quick and easy.
Should I do a boiling water flush rinse all the time if I want to get the absolute best possible lifespan?
Okay, yeah, so this one again comes up a bit where people think that, okay, if I'm doing a boiling water flush rinse post proper wet rides to make sure the chain's not bringing some contamination into my wax pot, probably even better is to do that every time. And a little bit, I guess, counterintuitively, the answer to that one is actually no. From normal dry road riding, the chain gets so little contamination in it that it is just not worth the time and cost of electricity to boil up the kettle every time and do it. You're never going to track a tangible benefit in your kilometre lifespan for doing that. And there have been, it's been quite rare, but strangely enough, every now and then, if we've had somebody who's been, I guess, seemingly doing all the right things, if they've had a lifespan for their wax chain that's a lot shorter than what we would have expected, sometimes we haven't been able to nail down like a poor prep or they're using a rice cooker. Sometimes the only thing sort of they've been doing differently to what basically everybody else is doing is that they have been boiling water flush rinsing every single time. And so I think it's possible. I mean, water is not pure. It's got minerals in it. It's got some chemicals in it. It's possible that if you're doing that every single time, that over time there could be a bit of a mineral buildup that's getting on the surface of the chain and leading to a poorer wax bond than you would get otherwise if you're just doing the rewax. So save doing the boiling water flush rinses for when you have done a proper wet ride. Don't do it after every dry road ride. There's absolutely no need, and it may possibly over time actually be more detrimental than doing it good. If you find that you just have to, you just really want to keep your wax super clean for as long as possible and you can't stop yourself, you're going to do a boiling water rinse every time anyway, then I would recommend every sort of probably third to fifth time that you do that, give it a flush through with methylated spirits then, just to make sure that you're removing any film and dry the chain and then do your rewax. And that'll make sure that we're not getting build up of something over time from the water.
So I ride and commute often in wet conditions on wet and sometimes salted roads. I've heard that waxing is not suitable for such riding and that I should use a wet lube. Is this true?
Okay, cool. This one's a great one. So this I think I may have just a little bit in one of my other videos, but waxing not being suitable for frequent wet weather riding is probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I'm going to be working, I think, for a long time to try to counter. So it comes from the fact that basically if you've got a wax chain and you go for a ride in solid wet conditions, especially if there's salted roads, and you park your bike and leave it and you come back the next day, your chain will have started to rust. And people think, well, that's not great, and it isn't great. So if you've done a ride in the wet, you're going to basically need to take care of that wax chain after your wet ride. So it basically means, especially if you've just got the one chain, every time you ride in the wet, you're going to either rewax it if you want the quick and easy method, or do your boiling water rinse to flush out the worst of the contamination and then rewax it. So some people think, well, gee, that's a hassle, so I'm just going to put a wet lube on, and my chain's not going to rust if I leave it for a day, and I can just keep adding my wet lube and I'm fine. So, but really what we've got to get into the mindset of is, all right, what's happening with our chain when we're riding out in these wet, harsh conditions? So probably the easiest analogy I try to get people to think of is, so imagine if you took the seals off your wheel bearings and the seals off your bottom bracket bearings and you go out riding in some harsh wet conditions. After a couple of rides, how are your bearings going to be feeling? Are they going to be feeling silky smooth, or are they going to be feeling really gritty, notchy, have a lot of crap in them, high friction, wearing quickly and getting damaged? Obviously the answer is going to be the latter. So the lubrication challenge for your bicycle chain, it really is quite an extreme challenge. So I think like step one I try to get people into the mindset of is that it really is your chain is just getting hammered, and it's got so many moving parts. The parts are small and they're under pretty high load. So if you just go the wet lube route, yes, you can just sort of lube it, park your bike, relube, and away you go. But fairly quickly, obviously that contamination is just going to build up and build up and build up, and you're going to have something that's more akin to a cutting fluid or a grinding paste in pretty short order. So the thing with, I guess, immersive waxing is that every time you do a rewax, you've reset that contamination back to near zero again. Yes, over time, even if even if you want to be super quick and skip the boiling water rinse, you are bringing contamination into your pot each time. So the wax in your wax pot is going to get, over time more abrasive than, fresh wax. But when you do a relube, literally you are adding, most times, say 5 mil onto a chain that's over 100 links long. So you're literally adding, say, less than 0.05 of a mil per link every time you relube. So the ratio of contamination to lubricant when you're doing that gets pretty bad pretty quick. Much, much, much faster than obviously if you were to pop the chain off and put it in your wax, a pot of sort of 500 mil of 100% lubricant. So the rewaxing is just going to reset it time and time and time again back to near zero and get things super low friction, super low wear. So the key with, if you're riding frequently in wet conditions, again, I bring it back to that multiple chain, scenario. Just run 2 or 3 chains if you need to, and you're just going to keep your drivetrain and your chain super low friction, super low wear. Things are going to go so much longer than if you just apply a wet lube and just keep applying and keep going. And the battle, like if you were to try to keep your wet lube chain as low friction as what you're doing with a wax, what it would mean is that basically after every single wet ride, you would have to solvent flush clean that chain every time. And you're going to go through liters of solvent basically every time to get it clean and reset. So, again, you got to ask yourself, what's easier? Solvent flush cleaning my chain every time to reset the contamination, or popping it off and sticking it in a pot of wax? Or, if I want to be really good, popping it off, giving it a boiling water flush rinse, drying it and sticking it in my pot of wax. The latter, I can assure you, is much easier, much cheaper, and will give you vastly longer drivetrain component lifespan. So it's going to save you a fortune. Honestly, the harsher the conditions you ride in, the bigger the benefits you get from immersive waxing versus your sort of traditional wet lube route. So, yep, hopefully that one.
Yep. And what should I do with my chains if I can't re-wax them straight away post a proper wet ride?
Yeah, perfect. So if you've got the multiple chain system going, and you're doing the right choices, and so you're going, beauty, understand why this immersive waxing is going to be so much better for my constant harsh conditions riding, but I want to do them all at once. So I pop my chain off that has been on the wet roads, whether you've flush cleaned it or not. It is good if your roads are salted. Even if you can't be bothered boiling up the kettle, just flush it in some clean water just to get the salt water out, and dry it with a cloth, and then wrap it in a microfiber cloth. So a microfiber cloth is very absorbent, and it's going to protect that chain from oxidizing, for a pretty good stretch. You're going to be able to sort of go a few days to a week, no problems without the chain starting to oxidize, so that you can then do a re-wax of all 2 or 3 chains at once. Don't put your chain into anything plastic, like don't wrap it up into a plastic bag or Glad wrap or anything. Plastic is basically, it acts like a humidifier. It's just a rust catalyst. Now, one thing, sorry, I was going to go through just to give you some hard data, I guess, on the difference between the immersive waxing route for riding in harsh, wet conditions versus, your wet lubes. How much difference does it really make? So we've done over 300,000 kilometres now of controlled testing with, obviously it's a lot of top wet lubes and the top immersive waxes. So for Block 4, I won't go into it now because it'll take forever, but the full test protocol for the ZFC test is online. It's on the lubricant test page. Block 4, which is the wet contamination block, so water and abrasive contamination is added during that test block. The average wear rate for molten speed wax and Silka hot melt in that test block is 8.5%. The average wear rate for the 2 top wet lubes that I've tested so far, which are Silka Synergetic and Nix Friction, is 28%. So that's basically sort of 3.5 times, and that's the top wet lubes. The data, which is online for a lot of the not as good wet lubes, is massively, massively higher than that. So, 8% versus 28%, the immersive wax is miles ahead. For the extreme contamination block, so this test block is really harsh. It's being hit with a lot of water and double the amount of very abrasive contamination. The average wear rate in the extreme block for molten speed wax and hot melt is 14%, and the average wear rate for the 2 top wet lubes tested, which again is Silka Synergetic and Nix Friction, they average 56%. So again, it's sort of about that, sort of nearly 4 times the amount mark. So, the hard data, this is proper, robust, controlled testing on the wear rates between the two is clear that, immersive waxing, because it resets the contamination every time you re-wax, as opposed to that ratio of abrasive contamination getting pretty bad pretty quickly, it just cannot be matched. So, hopefully that helps. Trying very hard to, I guess, counter this misconception that waxing isn't suitable for wet riding. It's just different. You just need to basically be on top of the fact that after a wet ride, you need to do something with the chain. Pop it off the bike, rinse it, wrap it up, and then just rewax it when you get a chance to rewax. And multiple chains is a smart way to go if you're riding frequently in those conditions. So, yeah.
Okay. Should I remove my wax chain if I'm going to wash my bike?
Yes, so get this one a bit. So really any chains, you don't want to water them with your garden hose and detergents if possible. So again, like I'm a bit surprised how many people actually do a full garden hose wash on their road bikes and only ride in the dry. I don't do that. I like my road bikes that if it's just been a dry ride and I want to clean my bike, I just spray some bike cleaner onto my microfiber cloth and I wipe my bike, and in a few minutes everything's great. If you've been, obviously really dusty or muddy or whatnot, you need to do a full clean. You do need to get the hose out on your bike and some bike wash. Then yes, remove the chain. Especially if you're immersive waxing, you don't want to get any bike wash or detergents or anything onto your chain that's then going to go into your wax pot, because that may contaminate the wax in the pot and it may then impact the adherence of the wax bond onto your chain. So yeah, if you're going to hit your bike with a hose, yes, remove the chain first.
And another one that I'll add from my experience too with cleaning your bike is just use baby wipes. They work awesome.
Baby wipes work great.
Don't do any damage to your bike or the chain.
Yeah. I'll try to remember when I do the how to do the 2-pot system like a boss at the end of this video. I've got a special little super cool spray bottle thing as well, which is what I use, which people might be interested in. But yeah, I'll try to remember to show that at the end.
Should I rewax my master link?
Okay, so Molten Speed Wax, and I think Silka as well, say yes. I know Molten Speed Wax do. I say no. The reason why I guess give different advice to that is that, and bear in mind I've done personally now well over 100,000 kilometres of immersive waxing in my own cycling training and racing. If you rewax the master link, what happens when it sets is that you get a lot of wax that builds up on the base of your master link pin, and it just makes it really hard then to push the master link or connect link all the way through the links to reconnect it. So it makes it harder to get those pins all the way through and then into the locking channel. It just greatly increases the chances that you may only get one of the pins in the locking channel and the other side misses. If you don't rewax the master link, it's an absolute doddle to reinstall your master link, and it's much safer in terms of just making sure you're going to get the both pins into both locking channels every time really easily. You should always double check every time anyway that after you've reconnected that the pin is in the locking channel on both sides of the link. Because if you set off and it's only in one side, that master link will fail at some point in the ride. Often early, but maybe you set off and you stand up pedal and the link fails and you go over the handlebars and have a hot date with the asphalt. That's not cool. So just always check that it's in both sides. And with the zero friction cycling, my recommending of rewax early versus pushing the treatment lifespan, there is plenty enough wax on the chain to take care of the master link. You don't need to rewax the master link. It does make reinstalling it a lot harder.
Can I reuse master links or connect links?
All right, again, this one comes up a lot. I don't know how many questions I get on master links every week, so I'm going to probably try to read this one so I don't miss anything. All right, so some links are officially reusable, such as the YBN QRS links, which are the main ones I sell. Most other brands' links are officially stated as single use only. For immersive waxing to be viable, you really need to be able to reuse your master link. So the YBN QRS links, which I have for 8 through to 12 speed, are officially reusable 5 times. Most customers, including myself, don't keep an exact count. Somewhere between 5 and 10 has been fine. In 5 years since I started zero friction cycling, I have sold thousands upon thousands of 6-packs of QRS links. In all that time, I have had 2 reported failures of these QRS links on road, both of which they were only engaged on one side of the locking channel. So for off-road systems. So once we get into narrow, wide tooth profiles, so like your mountain biking off-road, the QRS links, I really recommend them just for road only. They've got a short, straight locking channel, and as just mentioned, there's been just basically zero issues with thousands and thousands of links on roads, no safety issues. Off-road, I recommend using master links with a longer curve locking channel, like an Eagle link or the QL11 link, which has got a long, secure locking channel. Now, for other links that are out there, so you've got, for a 1011 speed, you've got SRAM Power Lock, you've got SRAM Eagle 12-speed mountain bike links, you've got SRAM Access Road 12-speed links, and you've got Shimano 11 and 12-speed links. They're all officially stated as single use. Now, I can say that from, I guess, the official thing from, I have to say, to cover myself legally, is that if it's a single use link, you should only use it once, as per their instructions. Unofficially, many hundreds, thousands of waxers, including myself, that are, say, riding with SRAM Eagle or Shimano 12-speed XTR, reusing 5 times an Eagle link or an XTR link. So far, a lot of people doing that, and we have had zero failures reported in all those years. So, I think they're pretty safe, but you've got to make the call yourself as to whether or not you want to reuse a single-use link. If you're not comfortable reusing a single-use link, but you really want to get onto the waxing side of things, I don't know if I've got a bottle handy. Silka Super Secret Drip, which is a fairly, recent, so about 18 months ago released product. Brilliant solid coating drip lube. It's designed to work with immersive waxing, so it was designed to work in conjunction with Silka Hot Melt, and you can use it the same with molten speed wax. So there's a brilliant option now that if you're not comfortable reusing a single-use link, then you wax, reuse Silka SS Drip for your next 5 relubes, then do a rewax to reset any contamination that may have started to build up over those 5 relubes, and use a new link on that one, and then you're golden. Rewaxing every time is still king. That still gives you the lowest possible wear overall, but Silka SS Drip is pretty darn amazing. It does set to a solid chain coating, has extraordinary dust resistance, just like immersive waxing, and it's tested extremely low wear as well. So if you're worried about it, freaking out about reusing a single-use link, that's your go-to option, and you can be on the wax train. All right, anything that I've missed there? You can also use other top chain coating lubricants in conjunction with immersive waxing if you don't want to use the Silka SS Drip. So UFO Drip is also a absolutely brilliant lube. It's a little bit more work just to reapply as a daily lube versus SS Drip. SS Drip's a really low application amount, so really easy to work in and wipe the excess. UFO Drip, it's a heavy application, so you'll have a fair bit more excess to wipe, but once you've done that, you've got an absolutely brilliant lubricant. And there's also True Tension Tungsten All Weather. That is also another brilliant chain coating lubricant, which a lot use and works perfectly well in conjunction with immersive waxing. So UFO Drip, SS Drip, True Tension Tungsten All Weather, they're your go-to if you want to do your 5 relubes in between immersive waxing and use your link once if you're on those systems.
So what link for what chain?
Cool. So yeah, following on from that, so things are getting a little bit more complex now, especially with 12-speed, because 12-speed standards have changed a little bit versus sort of pretty much a 10-speed chain was a 10-speed chain, 11-speed chain was 11-speed chain. They were the same standards, same widths. So for YBN 12-speed chains, I'm just going to cover them off bit by bit because, everyone's writing different things. So 12-speed YBN chain, if you're using that as a road chain on, say, Campy 12, then the QRS 12 links are perfectly fine and reusable 5 times. If you're using that chain off-road for mountain bike use, because the YBN 12 is a brilliant plug-and-play, really fast upgrade chain versus the SRAM Eagle chain. Eagle chain, the X01, XX1, super long-lasting chains, world's most durable, wear-resistant chains, so great for training, but nowhere near as fast as YBN chain for racing. So if you're using a YBN 12 for your Eagle mountain bike drivetrain, recommend using the Eagle mountain bike links because they've got the long curved secure locking channel. So Campy 12 riders, you can use either the YBN QRS 12 link or the SRAM Eagle link. Either will go on fine. Obviously the SRAM Eagle link is officially single use, so just take that into account, but also take into account we've never had a failure using it 5 times either. Shimano 12-speed, recommend staying with Shimano's 12-speed link. Shimano 12-speed chain is a little bit more narrow than the YBN or SRAM Eagle chains or Campy chains. So you don't want a little bit of extra play there. Stick with the Shimano XDR link and soon to be Shimano Road link as well. They are super, super secure. They are probably the hardest link to undo and get back on. So even though they've got a straight locking channel, they are super, super secure. SRAM Axis Road 12 speed. So Axis Road is its own standard. It's not cross-compatible with any of the other chains. They are a very thin chain and they have oversized rollers. You must stick with the Axis Road link. You have no other options there. Same with the others, so they're officially single use, but you're up to you to make the call on that. And KMC do have some links, some of which say they're single use, some of which say they are reusable. I've inspected them like super closely. No one can tell a difference between KMC's reusable and single use links. They look exactly the same, and they fit basically, I guess, those speed chains. So KMC 11 will fit pretty much any 11 speed chain, but for 12 speed, recommend using, I guess, that guide that we just sort of run through there. Not really very sure on the KMC 12 speed chains apart from them with their own 12 speed chain, which is a really fast wearing chain. So just be aware of that if you are using KMC.
Probably just to take the headache out of that for the customer. Generally, if they order a specific chain, we will make sure that they get the right length with that chain. Yes.
Yeah. So the people will note, so if you order like an XDR chain, it comes with an XDR link. If you order an Eagle chain, it comes with an Eagle link. If you order a YBN chain, it comes with the link. We do include an Eagle link because we don't know if somebody buying that chain is going to use it on-road or off-road, and I do recommend the Eagle link for off-road because just with the 12-speed or the QRS links, I have had a failure off-road, which never have had on-road. So I just like to be super safe. So I do include an Eagle link as well with the YBN chains. But yeah, so it is a whole lot of hoo-ha, which is probably why getting a lot of questions these days about master links and waxing and what's the right one for them for their chain and can they reuse them and all that. So yeah, sorry, that's been a whole bunch of sort of info on that, but there's just no other way, I guess, really, but to cover off each sort of specific one by one and the types of links and reusable versus non-reusable and what your options are if you don't want to reuse them. So yeah.
And yeah, like I said, to take the headache out of it for the customer.
Yeah.
If you get the opportunity to tell us what the use is going to be for, we can make sure 100% that you get the right length.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the last bit on that is that, even factoring in the cost of links. So for, most times, so if you're, say, most road riders, that you're able to use the QRS links that are 5 times reusable, like a pack of 6 links is going to last you somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 kilometres. So even factoring in the cost of, reusing master links, the drivetrain wear savings you get from immersive waxing, your cost to run reduction is still, vastly, vastly greater versus, say, not immersive waxing. So even factoring in the cost of the links, it still will save you a ton of money every year going down that path. So, and yeah, for those, if you're not comfortable reusing and you're using either SS Drip or True Tension or UFO, again, your wear rate's going to be so low that even factoring in the cost of a new link every 5th time, you're miles ahead, absolutely miles ahead. So, yeah.
And if you're new to all of this as well, at the end of the day, the more you do it, any of the links are really easy to use. The more you do it, the easier it is.
Yeah.
It is really easy. Going back to wax now, how do I know when I should change my wax?
Cool. So if you haven't kept any track of how long you've done, so how many rewaxes or how many thousands of kilometers you've done on your bag, if you're on Strava, it's really easy. You can actually put basically, the bag of wax in as a component on a bike if you've just got one bike and it tracks the kilometers of that. But if you've got absolutely no idea, pretty much you'll start to notice over time that a wax treatment won't last as long as what it did when it was a fresh bag. So over time, abrasive contamination will get into your wax pot, so it'll slowly become less amazing than what it was. The abrasive contamination that's in there, it does physically abrade the wax off, so your treatment lifespans start to get a bit shorter. So if you notice it's like, that my chains are starting to go, sound and feel quite dry quite early now, when they used to stay silky smooth for a really long time, then that's time to change to a fresh bag of wax.
And how do I change my wax?
Okay, so really easy. Just melt the wax in your pot and just decant or pour that wax into a small aluminium barbecue tray. Wear gloves because obviously it's going to be hot, so you need some protection to be able to grab your hot pot and pour it out. Wipe the pot clean of, just using some paper towel. You'll actually see when you pour it out, you'll see all the sort of, sediment, all the stuff that you've brought in over all the time of rewaxing. So wipe your pot clean. If you're concerned, like if you're doing a wax change because you're concerned that you've contaminated your wax with something, wipe the pot also with a cloth with some methylated spirits. That'll make sure that it's not left any film of anything inside the pot. If you haven't contaminated the wax or no concerns there, just paper towel, wipe it clean, pour the new bag in, and you're set.
I overheated my wax and it started fuming. Are the fumes hazardous?
Yes, the fumes are. So the wax itself is basically really, like paraffin itself is not toxic, but if you burn paraffin, it releases benzene gas, and benzene gas is toxic. So if you've really, smashingly overheated your wax and you take the lid off and a whole bunch of fumes come out because you put it on high and left the lid on, or you're doing some other form of melting your wax that's poor temperature control, don't breathe those fumes in. It's basically the same as candles. Like, believe it or not, you're getting the same thing when you're burning a candle. As you're burning the paraffin, it's actually releasing benzene gas, just a really tiny amount. But people have actually made themselves a bit sick from say really romantic bath. If you put like 50 candles in around your small bathroom and have a nice long soak with your partner, you've got a whole bunch of candles burning in a small room. You're releasing you can get not a bad benzene gas concentration for your romantic bath. So it's the same thing with the wax. If you've got your paraffin too hot that it's breaking down, it will release that benzene gas. So yes, the fumes are toxic. Don't overheat your wax. It's a simple thing. Slow cooker on low, lid off, can't go wrong. And just on that, sorry, if your wax blends contain PTFE, so again, there's a bit of stuff about Teflon. So Teflon in itself is inert, it's non-toxic, but if you burn it, then it releases a compound, I forget the proper name, it's a PFOA, that is toxic. And so that was where the thing came from, where if people really burnt the crap out of their Teflon coated frying pans on their stove, they could notice that their birds killed over and died, or they feel a little bit sick. It's called Teflon flu. So Teflon, if you burn it, again, it's it's a chemical change. So ordinarily it's inert. If you burn it, then a chemical change happens and it can release a toxic substance. So there are some DIY wax blends out there that tell you to put frankly ridiculous amounts of PTFE into your DIY wax blend. There's one that says to put 50 grams in per pound, and that's nuts. Molten Speed Wax is basically going to 0 PTFE. They have been for a long time at 1 gram per bag or per half kilo. Not 50 grams. So so there's very, very little, and there's zero, or there's very little in M-speed wax, 1 gram, going to zero very shortly. There is 0 PTFE in Silka, but some of the DIY waxes, if you've got 50 grams of PTFE in there and you've cooked it, you've got benzene from your cooked paraffin, and you got some fumes from your Teflon. So again, don't overheat it. Slow cook it on low.
How do I know if I've overheated and damaged my wax?
Cool. So fuming is a hint. So if you've got fumes coming off, it's got too hot. If you've just got it to the point where it's starting to fume, but it's not sort of too bad or been too long, you can sometimes get away with it. You'll know if the wax has been damaged. If it cools to either a white, a light grey or a dark grey, your wax is fine. If it cools with a yellowish tinge, the paraffin has been damaged, it's cooked, and its lubricity basically will be killed because the long chain molecules are broken down. So yeah, if it cools to a yellowish tinge, it's done. You need a new bag. Cools to white, grey, dark grey, all fine.
The next one, we've sort of covered it.
Yeah.
My partner doesn't like me waxing in the kitchen as it has a scent, and we are not sure if this is toxic.
Cool. Yeah. So when you melt the wax, you will get the smell of either molten speed wax or hot melt. If it's not fuming from you overheating it, it's not toxic. So it is basically, I guess, the same as lighting a scented candle. It's just that you're melting, instead of a candle, some molten speed wax or a hot melt. So that's just the smell of molten speed wax or hot melt. It's not toxic. So your partner has no concerns unless you cook it and start fuming it.
I've switched to waxing, but I've noticed some rusting on my chain or cassette. Why is this, and what should I do?
Cool. So especially cassettes that are steel, it's basically you're either sort of, I guess, getting the cassettes wet and then they're left for a while and they can start to oxidize. Same with your chain, but it's usually more of a sign of you're not sort of rewaxing as frequently as is optimal. So all you need to do is just up the rewax frequency. That will keep a coating of wax on both your chain's rollers and also your cassette teeth, which protects it from the elements, and it's also very wear protective. So the key there is just up the rewax frequency and you'll be fine.
I've just done a rewax and my roller is missing from the end of my chain.
Okay, so this can happen sometimes. So in the wax pot, your chain's going to get nice and hot. The parts are going to expand a little bit, and when you're swishing it in the pot, especially give it a really good swishing, this end of the chain is going to be what's called on the whip. So this can actually whip around in the pot pretty quick, and if it's all expanded, it can sometimes occur that the roller will pop out. So no major drama. If you notice that the roller is missing from the end of your chain, just decant the wax out into a small barbecue tray, retrieve your roller from the bottom of the pot. It'll pop back in easily into your chain, pour the wax back into your pot, and sorted. If you've got a strong magnet, like I do, you can also do that. An easy way to stop that from happening is just thread a paper clip through the end of the chain that's on the whip, and then the roller can never come out. You'll never sort of lose it in the pot and have to worry about doing that.
What to do for cycling holidays or cycling trips and bike packing?
Rightio, so if you're heading off, so you're immersive waxing and going on a trip or a holiday overseas or whatnot, and obviously the wax treatment's not going to last your entire holiday, a couple of options. Either pack one of the awesome lubes that we mentioned before to use, makes it super easy, so Silka SS Drip, UFO Drip, or True Tension Tungsten All Weather. Reapply as needed on your trip, and when you come home you can just rewax without having to do any cleaning. Sometimes people will, depending on how long it is, they might just pack a second chain, so they use one chain till the treatment's starting to get dry, pop their second chain on. Either of those is fine. If packing the wax is not practical, just use one of those top lubes or a second chain or both, whichever you need.
What drip lubes can I use with molten speed wax?
Okay, so apart from the ones that we've mentioned, so those three are the top ones that I recommend to use with immersive waxing. Absolute Black Graphene have also confirmed that their graphene lube is perfectly fine to rewax straight over the top of that without needing to clean it, because they use, I guess, somewhere in a similar range of like that super refined base that those lubes use. Other lubricants, so other really good wax emulsion lubricants like, say, Squirt or Smooth, you can use them with immersive waxing, but they are a different wax base altogether. So it's believed they're more of basically just a slack wax base with some tweaks and refinements. So slack wax does have a higher mineral oil content, and being a different type of wax and with some different stuff in it. It's okay to use those lubricants for a couple of applications. So apply it over the top of your wax chain. I recommend to run like those, after you've worked it in, really wipe the excess, and before you rewax, I recommend to run that treatment until it starts to sound and feel a bit dry, so there's really not a lot of that treatment left, and then you're fine to rewax. So I've never had an issue with people sort of using Smooth or Squirt that way and doing a couple of applications, especially if they've gone on a long trip and then coming home and rewaxing without any cleaning. If it's got to the point with Smooth or Squirt where it's, your chain is really, sort of obviously started to get a bit of build-up, then I would do a proper clean of the chain before you rewax it, just to make sure, because it's different wax. You may get an adherence issue if you just sort of rewax over it.
I'm doing a long event and I'm not sure if wax treatment will last. What should I do if I need to re-lube?
Okay, cool. So, all right, firstly, great job for going the low friction option for a long event, because you'll be surprised just how much time that can save you versus a higher friction option. All right, so the first thing I'd say is if you can, use the immersive wax as your number one option over the top chain coating wax lubes like your UFO drip, Silker SS drip, and True Tension Tungsten All Weather. They are brilliant lubricants, and come close in a lot of cases to in a I guess a single event to matching, or UFO drip claims to be faster than Molten Speed Wax and Silker. But for a really long event, the thing with those lubricants, anything out of a bottle, basically half of the volume at least is going to be carrier. So for a really long event, an immersive wax with Molten Speed Wax or hot melt, the chain's coated in 100% lubricant. So so start, I guess, if you can, with the Immerse wax if it's going to be a really long event that's going to push the treatment lifespan.
What distance are you talking about with a long event?
Yeah, it varies a lot. So so that, for instance, and we get inquiries on a lot of things. So I've done 12 and a half hour XC marathon events on both Molten Speed Wax, the new formula, which is really a lot longer lasting than the old formula, which is what we've got the data up at the moment. New data is for the new formula is coming up soon. I've also done the same with hot melt, and so my last event, which was 12 and a half hours, or like big XC marathon event, 12 and a half hours off-road mountain bike, 213 kilometres, and the chain was still in the silky smooth zone. It hadn't even started to sound or feel dry, but the conditions were really good. It was not super dusty. So, if it was really dusty, might have been struggling. If it was wet, maybe it's going to be struggling. Like a really wet off-road ride, any of these type of lubricants are going to be really struggling after maybe as little as 1.5, 2 hours. So what's really long, it's going to be a bit dependent on conditions, but we've got people that are doing 24-hour mountain bike races. You've got Leadville 100, you've got Unbound Gravel, you've got Paris-Brest Paris, which is I think 1,200 kilometres. So yeah, things can get at times, depending on the length of the event and the conditions, you really got to take both into account. And if you're worried that that race is going to exceed the treatment lifespan of your wax or wax lube, then it's really best to plan ahead as to what you're going to do, because you don't want to get to a stage where you're 2/3 the way through the race or halfway through the race and your chain is sounding and feeling terrible. Because if it's sounding and feeling terrible, what that means is that basically all of your lubricant layer has been abraded off, and you're now more or less running metal on metal or metal on metal with some grit inside it. And that's so your chain is going to go from being, like a 3 to 4 watt chain to a 15 to 20 watt chain. And that's not great. So especially when you're completely knackered in a massive event, you want all of your watts as much as possible pushing you further forwards every pedal stroke, as opposed to being lost to friction in your chain. So what are the best options? So my roundabout way of getting this one, if you're on a wax chain and you've only really got, hopefully not a massive amount to go, Silka SS Drip is a great one. Same as True Tension, same as UFO, just to quickly throw that on top of the chain and go. You should be able to do a relube in about 20 seconds and set off again. If it's like really harsh conditions, like if you know in advance it's going to be really harsh conditions, and your original treatment may run out quite early and you're going to have to do multiple top-offs, that's when it might be worth considering, using then a really long-lasting wet lube. So something like Silka Synergetic or Nix Friction, or there are some others that I'm testing at the moment which are proving to be extremely good, which is Revo Lubes and Rex Black Diamond. So there will be others as well. I just haven't had a chance to, obviously, yet to test all the top wet lubes that may be out there. But yeah, plan for, what may you do. If you can stick with wax on your wax chain, it's going to be better, and that it's going to be a lot easier to clean when you get back. If you mix in a wet lube with your wax chain, you're going to have to do a full solvent clean and reset. But yeah, you have to weigh up, a bunch of stuff. So if you can, Silk SS Drip, UFO Drip, True Tension Tungsten on your wax chain as a top up, brilliant. If you need something that's going to be exceed that, and you want to avoid multiple top ups, go for a long lasting wet lube like Synergetic or Nix Friction, or those others, and then you'll be sweet. Another option, so the last one is it's super expensive, but Absolute Black Graphene is still so far, and by a pretty big margin, the longest lasting lubricant in harsh conditions. So if you want to go flag to flag in a 24-hour event or something, and it's going to be pretty harsh conditions, then graphene lube is an option to consider if you can afford it. It's $240 a bottle. The first application needs to be immersive, costs you about $50 to do that first application, so pricey. So weigh up that or doing a top off.
I'm pretty sure you've covered most of this. I often do a very long wet training rods, and I find my wax chain is getting very noisy by the end. What should I do?
Cool. So this one, it's a common question that I get from a lot of countries that have really bad weather. So we're pretty lucky here in Australia. So this is, a little bit different to a race. So, a long event, you're really thinking about trying to get to the flag, as fast as possible. And, so adding a wet lube on sometimes might be what you have to do. I've covered off before, in great depth, why immersive waxing is going to be your number one for, even if you ride a lot in wet conditions all the time. But I've had a few of these come up recently where people are sort of saying, look, I really love the waxing, but it's not actually getting through my training rides. I'm going out for 3 or 4 hours and it's just solid wet basically all the time, salted roads, and my chain's getting really noisy, and it's just not lasting through my training ride. What should I do? So it is pretty similar. So either, again, just top off with one of those wax lubes, so you can just rewax as normal, or boiling water flush rinse and rewax as normal when you get home. Another option, which works more so in a training ride than, a race, would be to possibly consider taking a second chain. So especially if you're going to have a stop somewhere, if you're a waxer, you'll be pretty quick at changing chains. You'll be able to swap chains in, probably 2 minutes, and then you're off on a freshly waxed chain again, and you can just take care of both when you get home, and you haven't pushed any one chain to its limits a bit. That may not be appealing to some. If it's wet and cold, you may not want to stop for 2 minutes and change over. So but it suits some, not others. If that doesn't suit you, then top off with a wax strip lube.
The next one's probably a favourite one of mine. Why does my local bike store mechanic tell me that waxing is rubbish?
Excellent question indeed. So yeah, this is a great one in that still coming up a bit. We're slowly changing things, but a bit to go yet. So the bike store mechanic has either A, seen a lot of DIY wax jobs, which are really horrible gunky waxes, and that's not a great sight for your bike mechanic. They'll think waxing is pretty crap. Or they simply haven't been sort of keeping up with all the fun stuff that Friction Facts and Zero Friction Cycling have been doing and understand the huge benefits of immersive waxing. And they also don't want to stock it because they don't want to have to try to deal with the support question side of things like this. C, they do understand the benefits of immersive waxing and how much longer it's going to make all your drivetrain parts last, and they don't want to stock that because they fear that they're going to sell less chains and cassettes, and kid you not, that has come up. And D, they just want to sell you, obviously, what they stock because that's what they understand and know and going to make money on. So in a surprising number of cases, you can actually find, I guess, really good mechanics overall, and they're not trying to do anything silly like, try to sell you more chains and cassettes by selling you stuff that wears them out nice and quick, but they just, I guess, they haven't really kept up to date at all on the lubricant side of things. So you tend to find with some mechanics that, I guess if you imagine a young, starting out bike mechanic, they're like a sponge. They're learning, everything about all aspects of, how to look after a bike, and they got a lot to learn. Suspension, wheel building, building bikes, the whole lot. So, they're a sponge soaking all this up, learning how to be a mechanic, and then they often get to a point, strangely enough, sort of with lubes where it's kind of like they draw a line in the sand where it's kind of like at some stage, some pro level mechanic taught them that this is the absolute best way to clean a chain and this is the absolute best lube to use on the chain. And from that point, they can tend to get, they draw the line in and they lock that in as knowledge that they're never going to bend from. So they get very, sort of defensive about that, and then, all of this new data and waxing in that, they just think it's all rubbish, and they know what's the best way because they were told so by, ex-pro mechanic, and they just stick with that. So, but, there's been some massive progress in, the lubricant space, especially in the last few years. A lot of, major, manufacturers have put huge resources into developing some, absolutely astoundingly good lubricants now. They are just so far ahead of the options that we had even, say 5 years ago and especially 10 years ago. So, if the bike mechanic hasn't updated their knowledge on lubricants since 1990, and they just tell you that that waxing is crap, they just flat out obviously haven't kept up to date and they don't know, what's happening in the space. And the test data is all there and all the information is there on Zero Friction Cycling and so on. So if you get that answer, they need some updating and they should probably have a good read through Zero Friction Cycling website. So,
and from my experience there, generally the only mechanics that will bag waxing are the mechanics that have never used it themselves.
Yeah.
And because once they've used it, they'll never go back.
Yeah. And like, in all honesty, the percentage of, wins at the highest levels on, so key stages in World Tour races and Grand Tours, World Championships, Olympics, World Records, a huge number of those are basically almost always on wax chains. And there's a reason why that's the case, because the wax chains with the super waxes are extremely low friction. And you can do that day in, day out, and obviously low friction equals low wear. You don't hear about it as much, or it's not sort of, boasted about anywhere near as much as, what we'd like from those high-level races, because usually those teams have sponsor agreements in place with the particular, lubricant brand. So it's not great if they go and set a new world record or a world's win on a wax chain when they're, sponsored lube is X, so that's why you don't really hear about it. But yeah, it is. You can listen to again Marginal Gains podcast. A lot of the episodes, Josh Portner, who's worked with these teams a lot, he'll confirm as well that basically pretty much every time it's on a wax chain, and there's a reason. So yeah, if your bike mechanic is not up with that, time to update them or find one in this area. They might be great mechanic overall for most stuff, but when it comes to lubricants and chains, maybe guided by the resources on zero friction cycling as opposed to them saying, hey, just drip on this stuff and all's good.
Okay. I am overall loving the switch to waxing, but for my dedicated training bike, I'm getting a bit of build-up of wax flakes. Is there a way to minimise this?
Okay, cool. This one, yep. You can, when you've pulled the chain out of the wax pot, you can wipe off the wax or the external wax with a cloth to try to get rid of the excess off the outside that you don't need. It's just going to turn into flakes. So now when you're riding, so real world riding on the road, you don't notice the flakes at all. It just flakes off and it's just gone. But on your ergo, all those flakes will just flake off and you'll have a little pile of snowflakes underneath your trainer bike. So now, honestly, if I, as much as everyone knows, I'm obviously hugely in the immersive wax camp for a gazillion reasons. I don't have a dedicated trainer bike. I ride outside as often as I can because I like to ride, and I do ergos when I have to. And so for me, I'm using my same immersive wax chains and I just do 30 seconds with a vacuum cleaner after. However, if I did have a dedicated ergo bike, it always just stayed on the ergo. I personally would go with a non-flake option. So I would either use something like your super clean solid coating lubes like SS Drip, UFO, or True Tension. Or I might even go for a really long-lasting wet lube like a Synergetic or Rex Black Diamond Revo lubes that we're testing now, which are coming through pretty amazing on that. Because then, depending on how many Ks you do, you might be able to go months without having to re-lube. And contamination is just not an issue really inside unless there's sort of something really wrong with your house. Like it will go black, but it's really, they're not going to get higher contamination and abrasive, so they're going to just go and go and go and go. So yeah, if you get a dedicated trainer bike, long answer short, even myself as a dedicated waxer, I would go with a different option. So yeah.
The next one?
Yep. Yeah.
How do I prep my chain for waxing?
Right, yeah.
Versus an existing chain.
Cool. So if you've come across to this video before the other one, we have recorded a separate video on chain prep FAQ. So refer to the zero friction video on chain prep FAQ. So yeah, won't go over that in this one.
Okay. I am sure I prep my chain correctly, but it's sounding and feeling dry very quickly, and or it's noisier than I expected.
Alrighty, so some chains are noisy on wax, as the wax does not adhere as well due to the coatings that they use on that chain. So Shimano 10 and 11 speed chains tend to sound and feel dry about 50% faster than other chains like YBN, SRAM, Campy. KMC chains typically seem to feel and sound really dry really quickly. So pretty much 9 times out of 10 with sort of 10 to 11 speed chains, if somebody emails through saying like my chain's sounding really dry really quickly and I'm sure I prepped it right, it's almost always a KMC chain. The KMC chains, they can be a really fast chain and they can get along well with some other lubes, but they do seem to go just super dry really quickly with the immersive waxes. And I guess separate note now, just to help make this super long as well, SRAM chains generally have really good bonding with wax. So SRAM 10, 11 speed chains and SRAM Eagle chains, they stay really silky smooth for ages on wax, so they feel great. access road, getting different reports. So if the situation is I've got a really dry sounding filling chain and it's not a KMC, then in pretty much every other instance, it is going to be an access road chain. It seems like the access road chains are just a fairly noisy chain in general. The same sort of reports are coming up for those using your chain coating type drip lubes as well. And so really, again, the best thing for that is it just comes down to rewax frequently. So as soon as it gets out of that silky smooth zone, just rewax frequently, or you may want to help, just do that with, say, a UFO drip or Silka SS drip. Just reapply frequently to keep it nice and silky smooth. So that's just pretty much sort of how those chains are. If you've done the prep right and it's sounding noisy and dry really quickly, it's pretty much always going to be that. So,
okay. Do I need to stand and wait for the wax to cool to 60 degrees Celsius and remove the chain when wax near it set temperature to lock in as much wax as possible?
Okay, no. So this is on another video which comes up near the top when people sort of YouTube videos about waxing, where they've got the person standing there as the wax cools down and removes it when it gets to nearly the set point, and then puts the chain in water with the idea of locking in as much of the wax as possible. So no, definitely don't bother about doing that. The pressures inside your chain, due to the small parts, basically the loads in there from your pedaling reach into the thousands of PSI. After 10 minutes of riding, you're going to have the same amount of wax inside your chain as if you just removed the chain when it was at 90 degrees and you hang it to set on a 40-degree day. So all you're going to get by standing there and waiting for the wax to cool down right the way down to near its set point and take it out is just a heck of a lot more mess once you start riding. Nope.
I have a question about my DIY wax.
Right, yeah, so this one, already I get a lot of emails from around the world about DIY waxing. And I don't want to give it too much airtime because it's sort of not really the main focus, but some key just info, the stuff that keeps coming up with DIY wax is that, like, and the trouble is as well is that when people look up waxing on YouTube, the videos that come up are usually guiding them through a DIY wax process, and it's usually pretty bad. And now there's a lot of people that want to do a DIY because they don't want to pay a brand, and like I get that, and I'm a tinkerer as well, so for a lot of things in cycling and in life, it's like I want to tinker with it myself. I want to try to do it myself as opposed to necessarily pay for X. But when it comes to, I guess, the DIY waxing, the information that's out there generally is pretty poor. So the main things, or the main issue, is that most people are buying a really cheap wax base. So your hardware store paraffin, or really cheap paraffin off eBay or Amazon, or even worse, they're using candles. And if the base is cheap crap, then basically no matter what you put in it, you're going to get a crap lube. So this is where people are going wrong, where they're buying 10 pounds for bugger all from the hardware store, and then they mix in their 50 grams of PTFE, and then they mix in their molly, and it's just going to be a gunky crap mess still because the base is crap. So the number one tip is, if you're going to go down the DIY path, just make sure that your base is a top food grade paraffin. So it's not super easy. There's lots of different softness and hardness of paraffin. Some's too brittle, some's too soft. The best one really is Golf canning wax. So that's a top food grade paraffin that if you just want to do your own DIY wax, just go that. Avoid the cheap stuff. Definitely don't do the candles. That always ends badly. But if you're going to go the full DIY and make your own, try to make your own, I guess, blend of really fast wax, I guess weigh up the cost in that, because a lot of times I'll get a person, they've bought the wax from place X plus delivery, then they've bought PTFE from place Y plus delivery, then they've bought molly from place Z plus delivery, And all of that has added up. It's actually costing them a lot more than if they'd say just bought a bag of multi-speed wax, which costs you $44.90 and lasts you about 10,000 kilometres. And you know the testing and the development and the resources put into your multi-speed wax and your Silka hot melt, you know, a lot of this stuff, you've got like PhD chemists behind this stuff and a huge amount of testing verification. You're not going to match that because you don't have those resources and you can't sort of put that sort of time and effort in. So I guess way up, like, you know, is it worth spending $44.90 on a bag of wax that's amazing and going to last 10,000 K, or am I going to get this stuff from all over the world, random mix of ratios, still not going to be as good? I get a lot of requests for, you know, am I going to test this or can I test this sort of home brand blend wax? And again, the answer is just no. Like, I'm so booked with testing what are hopefully going to be, you know, awesome products that are coming out to the market that Zero Friction Cycling may look to stock. And I just get emails from all over the world saying, look, I've made this blend of lanolin and beeswax and, you know, soy and palm oil and, you know, paraffin oil and, you know, goodness knows what else, and it's the best thing I've ever ridden. Can I test it, or you know, can I test, you know, XYZ DIY waxes? They're just coming in all the time. If DIY waxing is your thing, go for it. Just take, I guess, the advice on the base. Take note of the total cost of if you're getting stuff from everywhere, and that my advice would be that unless you're using a really super refined paraffin base, whatever you make is not going to be great. It's likely to be really gunky and dirty. It's actually a lot of the DIY waxing that does lead a lot of the bike store mechanics to think that this waxing cape is, you know, pretty crap, because they see these bikes come in so gunked up that they can't even shift into the smallest cogs. So yeah, there's a heck of a lot of it out there. And like I said, it's cool. I really do get the DIY thing and tinkering a lot. But just unfortunately, a lot of the info on a lot of the popular videos that come up for DIY waxing lead you down not a great path in terms of the blend, and things often end pretty badly. And so many times, so over the years, literally so many times, that, you know, somebody's been DIY waxing for X amount of time, they decide to give multi-speed wax or hot melt a go, and they just say, look, it's just night and day versus what they were doing before. And obviously they then stick with either the multi-speed wax or hot melt because there's a reason why they are the top products. So,
okay,
yeah.
What is the best wax? Molten speed wax, hot melt, or graphene wax?
Cool. So, yeah, this one, for the first two, it's a little bit like trying to maybe choose between your children a bit. So I guess I started with molten speed wax because that was the original gangster of immersive waxing. That came from the original Friction Facts days, where Jason Smith found that, you know, paraffin wax was amazing. Well, the high grade stuff was an amazing chain lubricant, and he was working with a great guy called John Thompson as well for some of the wax stuff. And basically they sort of spun off a bit in that Jason Smith had the Friction Facts and developed the first race chains with the UFO wax blend, and then molten speed wax started basically with that wax as the molten speed wax. So now I've been, I guess, dealing with molten speed wax and using molten speed wax since I found out about it, and that's been a grand old journey, really a journey that sort of led to me being in this spot here. Hot melt from Silka. Now, Josh Portman was obviously a super smart guy, you know, head engineer at Zip for like 20 years, and now doing a lot of great stuff at Silka, and they put a lot of resources into hot melt. Hot melt is amazing. Molten speed wax have obviously known this is coming, so they've been working very hard on their formula. So their new formula out that I'm testing now, they're amazing. So which one's best? I can't actually really tell you. My testing, wear rate wise, they're super, super close. My testing doesn't give you a watts loss figure. So maybe hot melt's a little bit quicker, maybe molten speed wax is a little bit quicker. I'm trying to get that tested with my favorite sort of test lab in Denmark. But I think they're going to be super close on that front. They've been super close on the wear rate front. So either one of those, you cannot go wrong. Graphene wax, so that's absolutely black graphene wax. That one was a bit of a surprise. So graphene lube I tested, and graphene lube is amazing, but super expensive. And I'd recommend reading the detailed review for graphene lube, because that'll step through whether or not that sort of $240 bottle of lube is the right choice for you versus, say, immersive waxing. Graphene wax, that unfortunately and really surprisingly tested pretty badly. So it had really high wear rates from pretty much block one, clean block one at the start. And it only just got sort of worse and worse as the test gets a bit tougher as we start to add in contamination. So it fell really miles short of molten speed wax and hot melt, which, considering the performance of graphene lube, really was a surprise. I have had a bit of a chat with Absolute Black, the scientists behind graphene wax, about that. I haven't really got anywhere. Obviously, from Absolute Black's side, their graphene wax is amazing, super low friction. They've had no complaints from customers, all super good news. I've had lots of people from around the world write in to say that their experiences with graphene wax have matched what my testing shows and what I've sort of put out in my latest news updates on the website. So from what I know, or from what I've seen, till I can solve a mystery, all the data and information I've got is that graphene wax has not come out great. So what's the best wax? Either molten speed wax or hot melt. Take your pick. It's amazing times on either of those. Do not recommend graphene wax at this time. I think that's it. All right, so cool. So that was super epically long. I think we've covered, hopefully, all of the main questions that are getting in overnight from around the world. Pretty comprehensive. I still get the hunch that we are going to get more over time, and there will be a second edition. So we're going to do a cut here. I'm going to tack it on the end of this video. I'm going to show you the how to do the two-pot system like a boss, just so that that's on this same video. So we'll cut that here and we'll pop that in on the end, and you'll see that. And I'll also show you my little spray trick, which makes it super easy post dust rides. Really easy way to just clean the surface dust off as well. So two little hints and tips there to get your waxing to best level possible. Okay, so yeah, as per earlier in the waxing frequently asked question video, or FAQ video, just showing how, so for if you're riding off-road, gravel, CX, mountain bike, whatnot, and riding out in the dust, and you want to minimize how much dust you bring into your wax pot when you rewax. So one easy step for just post-dry dusty rides is to just spray a microfiber cloth with some methylated spirits. So this is a cool little can. May not have seen one of these, but these you can pressurize via your pump or air compressor. Saves you having to squeeze a thing, so these are pretty cool. But I just spray my cloth with some methylated spirits, and it's literally, I'm just going to wipe the surface dust off the chain, and that's basically done. So, and cloths like this as well, so if they've wiped off just, dirt and so on, you can rewash your cloths and just get them back, and they're great to be used to just wipe off dust off your frame and chain, and it doesn't muck up your washing machine and so on, which is kind of a bit more environmentally friendly than sort of going through a whole bunch of other cloths or wipes or whatnot. So that's just basically taking care of the surface dust on the chain. And so then all I would normally do, which we sort of demonstrated on a previous video, is I'm going to remove the chain, ready to do an immersive wax. The next part is I'm going to show doing the two-pot system like a boss. So we're going to transition over shortly into showing you the best method of doing the two-pot waxing system to cover that part off for the FAQ. So, but that is even if you don't bother with a two-pot system, which honestly, it's certainly not something that you should feel that you have to do to get the best out of waxing. Just immersive waxing gives you the huge benefits, and even just one pot, one bag of wax, you're absolutely fine. But just that simple tip of just removing the surface dust from your off-road rides before you pop it in the wax pot it just, yeah, keeps that wax more amazing, you know, without that abrasive contamination going in it for longer. So that's, yeah, that part for the FAQ. Alrighty, so yeah, the last part of the epic waxing FAQ video showing you how to do the 2-pot system like a boss. So normally, I guess most people with the 2-pot system, what they're doing is they're putting the chain into pot 1, and when that's melted, swish it around, letting the wax drip back out, and then moving that into pot 2, and getting then, you know, overall more waxes per bag. But what will happen over time is obviously pot 1 is going to get you know, a higher level of contamination that's brought into that pot. And if it's allowed to just sort of swish around, you are going to be mixing that contamination in with the wax. So 2-pot system is great, but it can be even better if takes just a little bit more sort of setup initially, but once it's done, it's done. So you can see that I've got a little thing that I just cut to fit this size pot. You can pick up this is just off literally like a baking tray. It actually came with one of the pots I bought, and I just snipped it. And so that just sits in the pot, and that raises the chain up. And so I don't swish this chain when I'm doing the 2-pot system. It is literally just a matter of putting that in there. So normally, I've just melted the wax so that I could show you that, but normally the wax would not be melted. I would pop the chain on top of the wax. I would turn the pot on, and then the wax is going to melt, the chain is going to melt down in it, the old wax coating is going to melt off, and any contamination is going to sink down to the bottom of the pot. And so that's melting off that old coating of wax and getting rid of the vast majority of any contamination, and that's going to stay in that pot, and then I just remove it from that once that had all been done. Normally I would leave it in there. If I put it in cold, I'd leave it in there for a good 5 to 10 minutes, but just for the video today, remove it from the pot, and then I'm going to put it into pot 2, and pot 2 is going to do the full refresh rewax, and the wax in this pot is going to stay super clean for a very long time, because all the contamination is melted off down into the bottom of that pot. And then after you've done, say, your 30 waxes or rewaxes in pot 2, you dispose of the pot 1 wax as discussed in the FAQ. Pot 2 wax becomes pot 1 wax. Fresh bag of wax goes into pot 2. And that's how you do 2-pot waxing to the maximum effect and keep your wax amazing for the longest time possible. So doing it that way will get you 60 rewaxes out of a bag of wax, and keep it mint. So, by the way, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and other YouTubey type things, like share with your friends. So that'll keep you up to date with the latest low friction news and hints and tips. And also put any comments down below, and I can try to look at those and take them into account for future episodes.